Hello, Internet. My name is Chamomile.
And I am off-brand Lindsay Ellis.
And we are still in the jungle. Our streak of one world per episode has been broken. But the good news is we're probably going to get 2 for 1 this time.
Yeah.
I am reasonably confident that we will be able to tie off Deep Jungle and then return to the climax. I love how we just walked out in the middle of like the climactic battle. While Hercules is holding them off while we catch our breath, and we're supposed to dive back in and save him, and then we just leave, do something completely different for an hour. Is this something going the wrong way? Navigating these vine swing things is always a hassle. It's also just kind of funny, just because your party members won't follow you when you're swinging around. Okay, yeah, here we go. There's an easy way through. Yeah, your party members won't follow you, even if you have Tarzan with you. Which means that you'll have, like, the vine-swinging guy, like, the person who immediately leaps to mind when you think of swinging on vines. He's in your party, and you start swinging on vines, and he just hangs out and waits.
The Tarzan yell that he does is still under copyright, too.
Oh, really?
That one is a little more defensible, because, like, it was first done by Johnny Weissmuller in, like, the 30s or 40s, and, like, it's not actually in the book. Like, it's a product of the movie, obviously, so... Like, I'm not as
that's still
heartbroken
like 80
about
years
that.
Old. Like,
it's still ancient, but it's not as egregious as the whole character being still controlled by Edgar Rice Burroughs' estate.
It's true, like, it's not as bad, but, it's still over a human lifetime, where it's, like, well past the point where you could plausibly be incentivizing new creation with this.
It's really frustrating with how long copyright is now. It's like by the time something enters the public domain, its moment has completely passed. Like, I was talking with Chamomile, and he was like, I would not pay $100 for the rights to Tarzan.
Yeah, no,
and, like, it's like at this point, we've spent like probably an hour talking about all the issues with the book. Like, at this point, probably all you would be buying for with the rights that you would use is the name, and I guess the yell.
Yeah, well, and I would absolutely be down to do a raised by wolves kind of story, and ones where it was specifically raised by apes, raised by gorillas. I would not bother making it an actual Tarzan story. Again, you could possibly talk me into paying maybe $50 for that name, tops.
It's like, you have to excise pretty large portions of the plot. You have to move him off wherever he is pretty quickly. You have to have, like, his island be really not connected to Africa at all. It needs to be, like, in the middle of the Indian Ocean or something.
Right.
Like, rather than having it be, like, off the coast of Africa, you, like, want it to be, like, this isolated island that's not really connected to any place. You want to get him off the island, I think, probably, like, I'm not sure, like, in Hollywood 3-act plot terms when you move him off the island, but...
It would be either the beginning or the end of Act 2. But, like, absolute latest, it would be the end of Act 2.
Like... So you get to the point where, like, what am I even getting from buying the rights to this book?
Yeah, like, if I were doing a feral child story, then I'm pretty sure the way that I would do this is I would have them in the jungle for Act 1, I would have them leave the jungle as part of Act 2, because, they have to, like, save a friend or something, or, some humans come in and they are fascinated, and so they follow the humans back, like, stowing away on their ship or whatever. And then in Act 3, they have to go back to the jungle in order to save the jungle from, the evil humans who are here to shoot all the apes or whatever. And every time I catch myself saying ape, the split second afterwards, I think to myself, that humans are apes. That's the wrong word. But I keep using it, though. But yeah, in Act 3, they would come back to the jungle because they would have to reconcile their two different worlds, and, you know, people from their human world are attacking their jungle world, and, yeah. Which, obviously, you know, there's something that I'm just dashing off the top of my head, so, like, by no means am I married to this, but that is the obvious way that you would do it, and it has fuck all to do with how Tarzan is plotted and paced.
And, like, the part of the... I think also explicitly, you want the part of the world that he goes to, the man's world, it's going to be, like, a big city, like, either New York City... It's either going to be New York City or London, not Wisconsin.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, if you really want to, and if you have room for it, and this would be for more like a novel or a TV series where you've got a bunch of space for this kind of thing, you could have a journey into the big city, where, like, for whatever reason, maybe he starts in, I don't know, North Carolina or something, and has to make his way north up towards New York City. And so he sort of, you know, closes in on civilization, starting from a rural area, going through a small town or a suburb or something, and then, but, like, you want him to end up in Times Square, or, I don't know, some, whatever the deep part of London is. I don't know London geography at all. Which...
I know our accents have probably been throwing our viewers, but we are American. Like, he needs to experience sort of, like, the most human,
yeah,
like the sort of peak of human separateness from nature. It needs to be a big city.
Yeah, no, he starts out in, you know, on some jungle island that is entirely unknown to humanity, and so the story needs to take him at some point to a deep urban center where he is completely separate from gorilla-nity.
Like, I think it's fine if he picks up language relatively fast for, like, to a degree that's impossible for somebody who's, like, 20.
Yeah.
I don't think you need, like, the weird him teaching himself to read. I don't know, like, whether you do the, like, broken language of, like, the Weissmuller and of the Disney, or if you actually go with the perfectly articulate version of, like, the actual book and some of the adaptations.
I mean, the way I would do it is... you know, when the humans show up in the jungle, throw a montage at him, and at the end of it, he's perfectly articulate. It's like, yeah, he learns perfect English in, like, 6 weeks or something. Which... definitely not, especially plausible. Like, that kind of thing has been recorded to have happened, but it is weird as hell. But it's also, like... We just want to get this language barrier out of the way, right? It's not... Unless you want to make that, like, part of the focus, you know, it would... We have a story about this guy who was kind of alienated from his own species, so...
I think part of what sets Tarzan apart is he's this deeply liminal figure. He doesn't truly belong in the world of apes or man. He is...
Right.
He's neither. He's, you know... Among the apes, he's the weakest ape. He is not physically adept. He's not an ape, but then, like, he's lost the acculturation that goes along with being a human. He doesn't know what it means to be a human. He's a completely liminal figure.
It's, yeah, amongst the apes, he is weak but brilliant, and amongst the humans, he is strong but shockingly uneducated.
Was he riding an invisible Heartless or something?
Yes. It turns visible eventually, and it is a really cool looking boss monster. Yeah. I believe I'm finally getting my cure spell at the end of this world. At which point my lack of potions is going to be a much smaller concern. I should probably be magic spamming Clayton, though. Like, so long as I've got all the MP and I can't use it on healing, I may as well hammer him with thunder from a distance. Just because that's almost an auto hit, and it might not do a ton of damage, but it's free hits. But yeah, the plot here, such that it is just that Clayton has drawn in the Heartless with the darkness in his heart. And, so then we have to put those fires out for the next 45 minutes.
Having Clayton be, like, the villain rather than just a guy who's there is another thing that I think Disney did correct.
Yeah, no, you definitely want some kind of poachers to be your villains, where, you know,
some sort of great white hunter type.
Yeah, they're from the human world, and they're coming into the gorilla world, and they're bad news. And
I haven't read any of the sequels, and I think potentially some of the sequels deal with like that, like the Elephant Graveyard and everything, but not read any past the first.
And I mean, you know, after hearing about the first, my reaction was, yeah, no, I think I'm good. I'm going to read something else instead, so...
Yeah, it's not even like, it's not something like where it's like, it was fun to read, but there was these problematic elements. It wasn't really an enjoyable read to me.
Yeah. And like that's...
Not judging like if you liked it, but it's something that I did not enjoy.
Right, like, I mean, you know, I'm a pretty big fan of Conan, and it's like, fuck yes, that series has problems. So, definitely not judging people for liking stuff that was terrible from, you know, the 1920s or whatever. Like, media be like that.
I didn't find it particularly well written either, though.
But, yeah.
It's a subjective matter of taste.
I found Conan to be really fun adventure stories, and I find the... Clayton has a hit scan attack, which that's super annoying. Now, it does have a wind-up on it, so, you know, it's not cheap or anything, but it is just difficult to manage. And without potions, you do have to play, like, really flawlessly.
Edgar Rice Burroughs also wrote John Carter of Mars, which is one of those...
I tried to read that one. I love its premise, but I was never able to get into it. I couldn't get past the writing.
Yeah, the writing in Tarzan is not great, so I can't imagine the writing in John Carter is any better. Like, I think it's pretty easy to, like, I think that part of the issue with John Carter is, like, it's been done in other movies. Like, it was a big influence for Star Wars, so...
Yeah, and I do think, I do like the kind of sci-fi portal fantasy aspect of being abducted and taken to this this world full of space opera aliens and stuff.
I'm like, you can just not have Carter be a Confederate soldier. Like, that's a pretty easy fix.
Oh, yeah, no, if you were going to make John Carter of Mars, you would probably want to update it to the modern day anyway. Like, you can have him be a veteran of the War on Terror if you absolutely need him to be an ex-soldier. And,
like, Tarzan feels like it needs to happen in, like, the 1900s.
Yeah, no, modern Tarzan is a joke. That's George of the Jungle.
Yeah.
But... John Carter of Mars is about someone going from Earth to a fantastic space opera world. And...
Did you watch the movie?
I did not.
They made some weird choices. First of all, Edgar Rice Burroughs shows up in the movie. Like, there's this whole thing where John Carter, like, tells him about like, Edgar Rice Burroughs is, like, related to John Carter and, like, tells him about what has happened. There's this whole frame story that was completely unnecessary and should have been cut.
I mean, in fairness, in the original novels, it is one of those things where this is an allegedly true account, so I see what they were going for, but also we moved past that a long time ago. Like, that is not really a trope anymore.
Yeah, it's not like when they were first doing novels and every single novel would have some sort of frame about how the author got the manuscript. We're well past that point. You don't need to, like, even, I feel like even by the time John Carter was, that was not really much of a thing anymore. But also, yeah, it's like it's
the Conan stories and the Lovecraft stories just kind of go. Which for Conan in particular, it is never really explained. Actually, I think there might be some explanation buried in there somewhere, but for 90% of the stories, it's just, hey, here's a Conan story.
So now we get to absorb Clayton's heart to gain his strength, right?
I mean, we did level up from beating him to death with a key, so I assume so.
I feel like this should be like Mega Man.
Fucking finally!
This should be like Mega Man, and we should get, like, Clayton powers that we can equip. Oh, and now all these apes that we have not interacted with at any point are going to come talk to us.
We did technically save them from a bunch of Heartless, but I don't blame you for missing it, because it was seriously blink and you'll miss it.
And they just tossed us aside.
But yeah, it's the annoying thing about this world. I was able to get through it relatively quickly because I still have most of this game memorized. But there's a bunch of apes in danger from the Heartless that you have to go and save. There's no indication of where they are, or how many there are, or even that you should be doing this. Like, you don't know that this advances the plot until it has advanced the plot.
It's one of those things that, and also, like, it feels like this road of trials is pretty dependent on you having the context of the movie. Like they all feel like if you had not seen the movie, you would have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, there's a couple of them that work as hyper-abridged versions of the movie, but then, like, Alice in Wonderland works as a plot unto itself. Again, because that movie was like a string of, like, 5 vignettes in the first place. So they just threw us into the last one, and it worked. But yeah, like, with Hercules, you have to already know what's up with Hercules to have any idea what any of these characters mean, or why we care about them. With Tarzan, like, there's not even a plot. You just wander around while the plot of Tarzan is vaguely implied to have been occurring in the background. We catch brief glimpses of it. Kingdom Hearts still thinks it's a platformer, by the way. But yeah. It does work just because we do know these movies. But it is kind of thing like, you have to have been born in a specific generation to get Kingdom Hearts. Because Tarzan is not one of those movies that you go back and watch later on, right? Like,
yeah, Disney has stopped doing stuff with it because it doesn't have the rights. Disney wanted to do an adaptation of The Wizard of Oz, but was not able to get hold of the rights because at the time they were not completely public domain. And then the MGM version came and defined Wizard of Oz more than the book does at this point.
Right.
Like, how the reason the Wicked Witch can control the flying monkeys is because of her magic helmet.
That famous magic helmet that everyone knows about?
Yes. And there are 2 good witches. There's the Linda, and there's, like, the Good Witch of the North, and they just made them the same person, which is one of those changes where it's like, yeah, you might as well. They don't really need to be separate.
Yeah, I vaguely recall that the Good Witch of the North was relevant to sequels, but, you can go ahead and introduce her in the sequel then.
I think Disney tried to do, like, a quasi-sequel to the MGM version with that one with The Return to Oz, where they have the Gnome King and Dorothy's at a psychiatric institution.
This one passed me by, but
Means heart. Friends in our hearts.
Heart.
Oh, so that's what it meant.
so yeah, Sora just hallucinated Kairi.
Same.
So Donald was correct. Donald was entirely correct in this. This was a total waste of time.
No
Yes.
friends. No heart. No friends.
Sorry about what I said.
Yeah, all for one, huh?
Just imagine Donald just like smacking him in the face. Like, I'm a royal agent. You don't get to question my decisions. I wish I could do the Donald voice because I would. How dare you?
Yeah, unfortunately, your Donald is basically just a Mickey.
Which could work at some point.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, sooner or later we'll get there, but it's not until the very end of this game, though. So if you dig deep enough into the game's lore,
Oh boy.
I think someone has a new admirer.
Tarzan is actually the original Keyblade.
I love how that's his.
Donald is actually a clone of the original Donald, who was actually a Heartless. You're not challenging me on any of these, so I'm assuming they're all true.
I mean, if I challenge you on them, you might stop.
The hunter.
But no, if you dig deep enough into the game's lore, though, sealing these keyholes is supposed to prevent the Heartless from arriving on, like, the paths of darkness and stuff. But if you go and revisit them, they'll respawn infinitely for you. Like, you know, you gotta leave and come back, but there'll be more when you get back.
A weak-hearted fool like him stood no chance.
I do like this council of Disney villains. Like, Disney's villains used to be like their best thing. They've kind of like not produced a good cartoon villain in years, but
Yeah, from the Renaissance and the original Disney era, they're,
He remains blissfully.
I feel like the last good Disney villain was probably Dr. Facilier.
Yes, the princesses.
And
Yeah.
They are
that one, he was pretty rad.
one by one.
but since then, like, because Frozen is just the last second villain twist that I have kind of grown to loathe with its villain. And then in Moana, there's not really like an overarching villain. There's like that weird crab they fight, but that's just Moana's Road of Trials.
Yeah. Which, you know, the spoiler alert for a movie that came out like 5 years ago, but the primary villain for most of it turns out to also be the main victim.
Yeah. Like, she's not really a villain in any classical sense.
Yeah, and you know, it would be super weird for many reasons to have her show up on a council of sinister villains like this.
Pixar doesn't. I feel like Pixar tends to not have really villains either. Because, like, Toy Story, like, it's not really. Like, Sid is kind of a villain, but, like, he's not, like, an overarching villain the way a classic Disney villain is. And, like, the actual, like, source of conflict is actually Woody, who is also our protagonist.
Right.
With, not really a villain in Inside Out. Like, it's more like joy realizing the importance of sadness.
The same deal where our villain is actually our protagonist. I should probably pay some amount of attention to this.
I guess the cricket in A Bug's Life, but that was also like, it's kind of the lowest, not everybody's first Pixar movie. Like,
Right.
doesn't really stand out in anybody's mind.
Yeah, I mean, Bug's Life was still part of that early trend Pixar had, where for a while there they could do no wrong. But
It sort of faded in people's people's memories.
Yeah, and it's a good movie, but it's definitely not one of the ones that stands out to you as like, oh yeah, it's a Pixar movie.
There's not really a villain in Finding Nemo.
There isn't, which is possibly my favorite Pixar movie. It's really fantastic, but
It is really good. I never actually saw Brave, so I don't know if there's a villain in that.
I actually never saw that one either, which I don't know why. I heard it was alright. I heard it was better than Cars, which,
Cars also doesn't really have a villain. Like, I guess like the villain is, again, it's kind of like Lightning McQueen being a bit of a douchebag.
right. I mean, there is his rival race car guy.
But he's not really there for most of the movie.
But,
Like, it's
yeah.
just Lightning in that village. Or, I guess you don't call a modern town a village.
That's the British accent creeping back in, confusing all our readers, all our viewers.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm from,
Readers. I've been blogging for too long.
excuse me, when I slip into the Britishisms, like... Because Moana and Frozen don't really have those classic Disney villains.
Yeah. If you wanted to assemble a if you wanted to assemble a cast of like new Disney villains of like year 2000 on Disney villains as a council of evil for a new Kingdom Hearts game, you would basically have like Facilier sitting at an empty table.
You also get that weird, like, sort of Disney Dark Age that comes at the end of the Renaissance, where it's all these movies that nobody really cared about, that didn't do well, like the Brother Bear, Your Chicken Little, that ranch, that like cow movie, I think,
Yeah.
is Disney.
Home on the Range.
Home on the Range.
And Treasure Planet, which didn't do well, but is a fantastic movie.
Yeah, that one, the whole story behind that, which I believe Lindsay Ellis has gone into, so once again recommending you listen to her. Like, that's kind of tragic because it was somebody's passion project, and you can tell, but it was not properly funded.
70% of our show is picking up Lindsay Ellis' table scraps from the media she doesn't cover.
Yes.
The other 30% is messing with the cold forces, which we're 80% sure, and I'm doing a lot of percentages here, but 80% sure that simply overhearing through YouTube the assorted monkey's paw wishes and vampire abductions and so far won't have any negative effects upon your own metaphysical safety. So it's fine.
It's fine, and I am the real Requiem. He's not been replaced. Ask me something that only the real Requiem would know.
How do you feel about cool fish?
Oh, I love cool fish.
Okay, but on second thought, I feel like that is something that anyone could get right. Who wouldn't love cool fish?
That is true. That is true.
Okay, which 1994 movie was directed and written by a then closeted director and has been interpreted to be a metaphor for the struggles of growing up gay in a homophobic society?
Oh, that's easy. That is Independence Day 2, actually.
And I'm just now realizing that the only way I have of verifying this is to ask Requiem, because he's the only one who would know.
Yeah. I'm telling you, it's the second Independence Day, which definitely came out in 1994.
That sounds legit.
I picked that answer as a joke, but I think like the director to that Independence Day movies is actually gay.
So this is actually like a super deep, where, I come up with some random bullshit string of qualifications, and then you actually are able to pick something out that fits most of them.
Yeah, they picked Independence Day, and I picked Independence Day 2 to make it even more ridiculous. isn't the director to Independence gay? I think he actually is gay.
And, the entire joke there is that I can't even remember a director's name, so...
Yeah, Roland Emmerich is gay.
I'm pretty sure
don't
I've
think
heard
there's
that
any-
name before. I have no idea what other movies he's directed.
I don't think anyone's ever done a queer reading of the Independence Day movies. But
I mean, I think I know what we're doing after Kingdom Hearts, then. I keep thinking I can attack Cerberus while he's doing his big dark breath attack, and I keep being wrong. But yeah, having access to a steady source of healing makes this fight a lot easier. It's funny, I have like nothing to say about Greek mythology, which I feel kind of bad about because I've read a lot of it.
same.
But like, it's neat. Did you know there's like a whole genealogy and like different generations of heroes? That's kind of cool. There's like a continuity to it. It really is like the Avengers. So
Yeah, that was like,
cool.
I think Grant Morrison is the one who suggested comic books as being the modern version of mythology, which I'm not sure. I feel like I take a certain amount of issue with that because, like, mythology, there was not anybody who controlled the IP, essentially. Anybody could write a story, and there are contradictions and revisions that happen. Like, Ovid changes a lot of the Greek myths in the Metamorphosis because he had religious beliefs about reincarnation and vegetarianism, so he tries to sort of incorporate it into his big story. Like, there's not a canon in mythology the way there is in, like, Christianity. Like, you can't be, like, a heretic.
And there's also no divide between canon and fanfiction, the way there is with modern IPs, which, by the way, is doing serious damage to our modern mythologies. Like, there's definitely differences between Greek myth and comic book continuities, but one of the biggest ones is just that our modern myths are getting maimed by our copyright system.
Yeah.
Like, we would not have to care about bad Star Wars movies if anyone could make a Star Wars movie. Because what happens with these, and this happens really consistently, is sooner or later, after a couple of decades of shakeout, which, Star Wars came out in the 70s, that has already happened, or would have at least. After a couple of decades of shakeout, someone gathers up all the best stories and assembles them into a single continuity, and by virtue of being really good, that is the continuity that becomes accepted, and people begin building from that.
No problem.
It's like there is this natural, like, git merge that happens. Like, human storytelling is self-regulating so far as quality goes.
Okay, we'll be back.
Whenever people start having issues with, like, canon, I just always think of I just want to recommend Roland Barthes' The Death of the Author. Like, in a situation like Star Wars, where you have movies that you don't want to consider canon, you don't have to consider them canon. You don't have to give the Disney movies any sort of special authority just because Disney bought the rights from George Lucas. You don't actually even have to give the movies that George Lucas was involved in any sort of special authority. Like, you can say, my Star Wars canon is A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back, and everything after that I don't consider to be part of the canon, and I don't discuss it when I think about Star Wars. The author of the dead, like, especially in a movie, when you think about a movie, like with a book, there's two people involved in interpreting a book. There's the author and the reader. When we have a movie, you add, like, 3 people to any given scene, because not only do you've got the director, you've got the writer, you've got the editor, and you've got the actor, and you've got the person watching it. So that's like 5 people compared to 2.
And that's for a small scene. Like, that's for a scene with one actor in it.
Yeah. You're going to have a bunch of different people who are creating this interpretation, and this is sort of reader response theory. And since I am off-brand Lindsay Ellis, like, you don't, like, even if George Lucas said a piece of thing was canon or not, like, you don't have to take his point of view as authoritative at all. Like, you don't have to, like, the big thing people point to that, and because George Lucas owned the copyright to Star Wars, he was able to force this on us, was the Han shoots first, which,
right,
like, he had material power to force that canon on us, but you really don't have to consider it canon if you don't want to, just because he owned the rights and he wanted to revise it. Or the infamous scene with when Han says he did the Kessel Run in a certain amount of parsecs, and people point out that parsecs is a measure of distance instead of time, and there have been all sorts of explanations for it. The actual explanation is just George Lucas didn't know what a parsec was. But you don't have to take any, like, I think he's given explanations, like there are canon, quote, explanations for why Han says that. None of them are actually authoritative, even if it was actually in the script. Like, you're not watching the script, you're watching the movie, so you can really interpret it however you think the interpretation works.
Yeah, and that is not... Like, that is how storytelling has worked for thousands of years. Greek mythology and Arthuriana, and probably the Norse sagas, although the history on that one is less solid. But things like this, they all operated on this system, where stories that people didn't like did not get retold. And that was the quality control. And it worked great. It's like, the fact that the listeners had the power to say, I don't like that story, and I don't want to listen to it, and that this drove which stories got told, because no one wants to talk to an empty room. No one wants to waste all the parchment by the time you get to Arthuriana, especially. A lot of these are getting written down. No one wants to waste the parchment on a story that no one, wants to actually hear. Which, so you get quality control. It happens automatically.
There's actually an essay about this called The Slaughterhouse of Literature, which sort of talks about the sort of how genre tropes sort of come to be. They're the most successful things, and they get reproduced. Uses the example of Sherlock. The Sherlock Holmes stories are these most successful versions of detective tropes, and you can see the evolution of them out of the Victorian detective literature. But it is this process of the best ones getting picked up and the bad ones getting dropped.
Which, yeah. And it kind of bugs me because people worry about, like, oh, well, if anyone could make, a Star Wars movie, or, and it comes up in practically every fandom. It's like, if anyone could make a Star Wars movie, then there would be tons of really bad ones, and they act as though, like, and then those would be in continuity. It's like, no, they wouldn't. The continuity would happen automatically. You wouldn't have to keep a wiki.
Did we talk on camera about how Sherlock's also has a weird copyright situation? I don't remember.
I don't think we did. I think that was part of the pre-recording banter, where, we were just basically doing mic checks. And, we could have just said test, test, test at each other for 10 minutes, but... I mean, we could have, but why?
So Netflix is getting sued because they're doing a Sherlock movie. Not because they can't do a Sherlock movie, but because the Conan Doyle estate that Sherlock Holmes having emotions is still under copyright, which...
And the Conan Doyle estate is, if I'm remembering this correctly, entirely unrelated to Conan Doyle?
Yeah, I'm pretty certain that nobody involved with the Conan Doyle estate at this point is related to Conan Doyle. Like, and even if they were, it's one of those things, like, you're his great-grandchild. I don't think he cared that much.
Right, yeah, like... Okay, but I have a weird gummy that I need to show to someone in this town. I need to figure out who. Do I need to find Squall?
One thing I love about the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle is he writes this very logical detective, and he was himself very gullible. You know the Cotlington fairies?
Yeah.
Yep, he was a big advocate of that. And he did all this while simultaneously being friends with Harry Houdini, who was a noted skeptic. I just imagine him the whole time being like, Arthur, you know none of this can be real, right? These little girls do not take pictures of fairies in their backyards. These are clearly cutouts from a magazine.
This is a speculative way of putting it. I think it was a Cracked article put it this way, but talked about how the girls who had done the hoax had to have gone into panic mode when they realized they had fooled Sherlock Holmes. It's like, oh shit, this is officially a big deal. I don't know if we can keep this up. Like, it's like we're officially past the point of no return. We have to keep this deception up until we die. All right, can you tell me about special gummies?
Was that one of the Final Fantasy characters? Like she's dressed like she is.
Yeah, she's got the cyberpunk circus look, which I adore, by the way. But all right, let's go ahead and.
It's a little controversial on the internet.
I mean, there are people who really dislike the Final Fantasy aesthetic, but I mean, fuck them. It's fantastic. I am not even going to bother to load up any equipment onto Donald, because no matter what I do with him, he is going to die instantly. And I plan on... Oh, hey, I have scan. Fantastic. I wonder how long I've had that. Have I had that for a long time, just didn't notice the unlock? Don't care about Vortex. Sonic Blade is probably not usually worth the effort, but I can at least show it off once or twice. Hopefully, if I'm able to actually pull it off. I have almost no practice with these special attacks like Sonic Blade because they're kind of useless.
I think Final Fantasy X with at least Titus's outfit was when you hit the point of where like it hit an excess amount with some of the like zippers and like weird asymmetrical design, and it's kind of dialed back to a much more reasonable aesthetic since then. Like, I think 10 is when people kind of like had a backlash against it.
Right.
And it was specifically Titus's look, like Yuna's look, and well, Titus is in the main villain who, because of his design, looked like he had a giant pot belly.
A pot belly with a six-pack.
It was weird. Like, that was kind of like the nadir of the aesthetic, but they've...
I mean, you call it the nadir. I absolutely loved it. Like, the criticisms of it are not wrong, but it is one of those things where I love it because of how bad it is. Like, it's like the Batman and Robin movie, and the whatever they called the one with Two-Face and Riddler, where, like, yeah, those movies have a really ridiculous aesthetic, but they know exactly what they're trying to be, and they're being that, and I love it.
Are those are the Schumacher ones?
Yeah, like they have this neon Gotham that I really like.
I think, funnily enough,
you know,
like we kind of bumped on this when you were trying to figure out to find the real Requiem, which I definitely am. Like, I think there was an element of homophobia to that backlash, because Schumacher was putting a little bit of the gay aesthetic into his interpretation of Batman.
Which, by the way, I think I might just love the gay aesthetic. Because I also really liked Hellraiser, so...
Oh, man. Well, like, that 90s version of Batman was going, like, with Burton, it was pretty dark, but it was also very, like, comic booky, like, pulp. I'm not sure pulpy is the word, but very, like, I'm not even sure what the word to describe it is. Like, it's not like realistic the way the Dark Knight ones are.
Right.
It's very
it's gothic is what it
60s.
is.
Gothic. It's very gothic. It's very aesthetic. It's very not trying. It's dark, but it's not realistic.
Right. You know, it is a dark fantasy the way the Avengers is a fantasy story, where it's like,
Yeah.
that's not really what that genre means, but in this context, you know what I'm talking about. So
Yeah. And like Schumacher did lighten it, so he went for a much lighter tone
Yeah.
than Burton had.
yeah,
But-
I mean, it's light and it's ridiculous, and like I do really like the Burton Batman too. Like, it's not like I'm saying the Burton Batman because, you know, it's the internet, so the default assumption is that if I like the second two movies, that must mean that I hated the first two. But no. Like, I'm not taking a side here. Well, I mean, I'm taking the side that Batman Forever, it was Batman Forever and Batman and Robin looked awesome. Specifically because of how ridiculous they were. Oh, hang on. I don't need to go to the 3rd district. I need to go to the alleyway. Yeah, when I was thinking about this, oh god, there's more. I was thinking about, like, you know, do I want to just, whenever I have to go back to Traverse Town, because you do have to come back here every now and again. We got a special navigation gummy on the Deep Jungle world, and we've got to go figure out what it does, because that'll unlock the next set of worlds for us. And, so, you know, I was thinking about, like, oh yeah, sooner or later I'm gonna come back to Traverse Town, and, like, man, that place really gets packed with Heartless during repeat visits. Do I maybe want to just run past them? But I think my combat performance over the past couple of episodes has proven that, no, I need the XP. So, luckily, we are nothing if not skilled at finding tangents to go off on.
Indeed. And then we immediately go quiet.
Right, yeah. But, on the subject of, oh my god, that's right, I do need to get into the 3rd district, because that is where the unlock for this is. This game is coming back to me in bits and pieces. Which, I mean, if we ever do Kingdom Hearts 2, that is going to be extremely appropriate, because Sora has actually lost chunks of his memory in that one.
Of course he has. Hollywood loves its retrograde amnesia.
Which, it's
No,
weird
most of us.
in Kingdom Hearts 2 specifically, because it's mainly only used to eliminate his memories of Chain of Memories, which was, like, it almost feels like them trying to backpedal out of having advanced the plot in a handheld game.
Isn't like Sora turned out to be like somebody's robot simulation or something?
No. That is Roxas, who is kind of Sora, but also not. It's complicated, and also I kind of want to hold on to the details just so that you can see them in their full horrific glory, just in case we ever do that Let's Play. Because if we ever do Kingdom Hearts 2, since that's the one where the lore really went off the deep end, if we ever do Kingdom Hearts 2, the angle we have to take with it has got to be Requiem, behold the madness. That's also the one where Tetsuya Nomura, one of the only guys I know, just because I really like his aesthetic. Like, I get that it's a nightmare, but I love it for that. So he's the zippers and belts guy, and he definitely, like, he got to the point of, like, self-parody in Final Fantasy X, where he was a character designer. I think Lulu from Final Fantasy X is, like, the most ridiculous epitome of that style, because she has a dress made of belts, like, entirely.
Wow. Because you actually, like, this is funny, like, you actually kind of really do have a gay aesthetic. Like, you're talking about this, it's very, like, you have a camp appreciation of this stuff. Like, I actually want you to read. I don't know if like you would want to do this, but I would kind of like to see you read like Susan Sontag's Notes on Camp, which discusses camp and its place in sort of like gay male culture. Because like your appreciation of this stuff sounds like what she talks about in Notes on Camp.
I mean, go ahead and send it to me after the episode, which is gonna be in like 5 minutes. So, but yeah. It's called Notes on Camp, so I'm assuming that this is going to be like, you know, a 20-page essay and not a 300-page book.
It's not a book, it's just an essay.
Yeah. Which, I mean, if it's the book, then I'll totally read that, but it might take me a while longer to get around to it. As it is, like, if it's an essay, then I will probably, hopefully, have read that by the time we record the next episode. I am kind of really busy lately, but I can probably find time for it. Like, you know, real talk, even when I'm really busy, there tends to be at least a couple of hours in any given day that are just lost to, you know, I lost focus and watched YouTube for 3 hours.
Oh, it's only like 13 pages.
Yeah, so I should be able to get that through that in like half an hour tops. That should be fine. Okay.
So did we completely complete? Did we fully complete the Colosseum stuff?
We completed everything that is available for now, because it is a Coliseum thing. There are other tournaments, and I believe one of them is even plot relevant, as like, you know, an optional subplot, but...
Plot relevant. Does Hercules ever join the party?
Not in this game. I think that he does in Kingdom Hearts 2, but...
That's disappointing.
Yeah, nah, the arena is more about the people you get to beat up than the people who join your team.
I mean, we've already beat up Cloud.
Well, I mean, Cloud beat us up.
Oh, right.
There is, in one of the tournaments, Cloud is the end boss, and you have to fight him. He's stronger, too. Which is weird, because part of the plot, and, you know, it's blink and you'll miss it, but part of the plot in the Hercules is that Cloud has accepted dark powers from Hades to try and hunt down Sephiroth, and that was sort of Hades' end of the contract they had. And apparently he gives those up, and yet he is stronger the next time you encounter him.
There's something about this musty place.
I assume that's not really Kairi.
It reminds me of the secret
Yeah,
place
nah.
at home,
It's
where we used to scribble on the walls.
Sora
It is
hallucinates her a couple of times.
It is the dream of the dark side of Kairi's heart.
You're about 70% accurate.
Oh my god. I just try to go as ridiculous as possible. Oh hey, it's Merlin.
Yep.
That's one of the like classic Disney movies, but I think it's like one of the less good classic ones. Because like they are only able to adapt like it's really short. Like it felt really short, and also they're not able to adapt like any substantial amount of the author mythos. They're not able to get a full arc, and it just ends with Merlin getting mad and blasting himself to Bermuda.
Yeah. I mean, The Sword and the Stone is the origin story for King Arthur, and like most origin stories, you know, it's an important part of telling a complete beginning to end, you know, Uther to Camlan recounting of the legend of King Arthur. But outside of that context, it's one of the weaker stories. You know, it's a lot like Uncle Ben's death, where it's like, unless you are setting out to tell a complete story of Spider-Man, skip that.
Well, the King Arthur like arc has a lot of again elements where little hard to adapt to a children's movie, particularly in like the 60s or 50s, whenever the King Arthur movie came out. Like, can't have King Arthur hooking up with his half sister.
Right. It's funny because, like, medieval stuff tends to be way less yikes than Victorian stuff.
Because they don't have a conception of, they don't really have any conception of race. Like, race is not a concept in
Right. Like, when
medieval
people
thought.
from other races show up, they're often like, I mean, it is a little bit othering, but it's like, you know, it's this cool and exotic, like, you know, oh yeah, Sir Palamedes, the Saracen knight. He's, you know, he's an Arab, or, you know, exactly what ethnicity is really vague because medieval British people have no idea how the Middle East works. But yeah, he's an Arab who converted to Christianity and joined the Knights of the Round Table, and, you know, he is someone's fanfic OC that got written into the canon because there was no division between fanfic and canon. If it was cool, then it got added to the canon.
Even with stuff like gender, women had a lot more agency in the Middle Ages than people realize. And like the Renaissance is when, like, in our language, we start to see the language get changed to sort of subordinate women. Like, that's when you get in our language now, man has this weird double meaning where it's all humans, but especially male humans.
Right.
At the time, man just meant all humans. You were a with or aware. With is a female human, aware is a male human.
Which, by the way, I support going back to weremen, just on the grounds that it sounds fucking badass. Like, we can go ahead and have men mean all humanity, and weremen means male humans in particular, just because I want to be able to call myself a wereman and have people know what that means, and, you know, not think I'm making some kind of werewolf thing.
Like, we think of history as being automatically progressive, but there are a lot of times where things have gotten worse.
No, there's this conception of history as constantly progressing in one direction, and it's not true.
Like in Victorian literature, there was a common trope of you having like the main character having like an aunt or uncle who grew up in like the Georgian or Regency era, who was kind of decadent and is thus embarrassing to the family because they grew up at a time when things were a lot more open. Or like we have like letters from women written at this time where they talk about how their rights are getting restricted and they have less freedom than they used to. It's depressing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, Victorianism was a peak for sexism and racism.
Or even like with like homophobia, like in the Middle Ages, they really don't start to like crack down on sodomy until the High Middle Ages, which is when you see Europe get more pull itself out of the Dark Ages, but you also see this sort of development of a persecuting society against kind of unfortunate.
Yeah.
Is that us? Is that Sora?
So, this guy is a Titus fake out. I forgot he existed and walked right past him the first time through. But he looks a little bit like this game's version of Titus. And so when you first arrive here, you can go and talk to him. And he'll be like, "What? No, I'm not your friend. You're thinking of someone else."
Huh.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly who we're looking for to unlock the next set of worlds, and we're basically we're past the end of the episode anyway, so I will figure that out sometime off camera.